It was December 1944, deep in the forests of the Ardennes. Snow blanketed the ground, muffling the sound of the war, but the air was heavy with tension. The Battle of the Bulge was underway, and Allied soldiers faced one of the most grueling challenges of World War II. Among them was Private John Harper, a 19-year-old American from Ohio, fighting in Europe for the first time. John was part of a small platoon tasked with holding a critical position near the Belgian town of Bastogne. Supplies were low, morale was lower, and the relentless cold was their constant companion. Each breath froze in the air, and frostbite had become as much an enemy as the German forces they were battling. One night, as John sat huddled in a makeshift trench, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a letter from his younger sister, Grace. It was her usual cheerful scribbles, filled with stories of home and reminders to stay safe. But this letter carried something extra. A small, folded paper star she had made. She wrote, "Keep this with you and it will bring you home." John smiled despite himself, tucking the star into his coat. That night, he made a promise to himself. No matter how dark or difficult it got, he would make it back to Grace. The next morning, the enemy launched a massive offensive. Artillery shells screamed through the air, and the forest was consumed by chaos. John's platoon was ordered to hold their position at all costs. As the Germans advanced, it became clear they were outnumbered. The fighting was fierce, and one by one, John's comrades fell. By dusk, John found himself and two other soldiers retreating deeper into the forest. Exhausted, freezing, and wounded, they stumbled upon a small abandoned farmhouse. It offered little protection, but it was better than nothing. The three soldiers decided to take turns keeping watch. John took the first shift, clutching his rifle tightly and listening for any sound that might signal the enemy's approach. The star in his pocket felt like a small, warm reminder of home, a thread of hope amidst the despair. As dawn approached, John heard a faint rustling in the trees. At first, he thought it might be animals, but then he spotted movement. A group of German soldiers was advancing toward the farmhouse. Knowing that fighting was inevitable, John woke his comrades. They braced themselves for a final stand, but something unexpected happened. A young German soldier, likely no older than John, emerged from the trees with his hands raised. He spoke in broken English, saying that his group wanted to surrender. They were just as cold, hungry, and desperate as John's group. For a moment, there was silence. The weight of the war seemed to press down on everyone. Finally, John lowered his weapon. His comrades hesitated but followed suit. The Germans, relieved, dropped their weapons. In that frozen forest, a temporary truce was forged not by orders or strategy, but by the shared humanity of soldiers on both sides. As the hours passed, the two groups shared rations and stories, trying to stay warm. John even pulled out Grace's star, showing it to the young German soldier. The soldier nodded, understanding its significance without needing translation. By mid-afternoon, the sound of Allied reinforcements approaching broke the fragile peace. The German prisoners were handed over, and John's unit rejoined the larger force. But that fleeting moment of connection stayed with him. Months later, in May 1945, John returned home to Ohio. He had kept his promise to Grace, surviving the brutal winter and the battles that followed. The paper star was still tucked in his pocket, worn but intact, a symbol of hope, resilience, and the reminder that even in war, humanity can shine through. Years later, John would tell his grandchildren about the war, but he always ended with that story in the Ardennes. In the coldest, darkest moments, he would say, "We remembered that we were all just people under the same sky. End of story."